Hey everyone, today I'll be talking about bananas and more specifically the challenges they face in global production. So the podcast I chose was through PBS International, and it was an interview with Dr. Alina Tripathi. She's a plant molecular biologist at the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture in Kenya. She did her postdoc actually at UNC Greensboro on soybeans, but she's also studied chickpeas in the past, but now she uses biotechnology to develop new varieties of bananas. So some of the significance of bananas, as you can see with these first two, they're distributed very widely and they drive lots of economies. And then you can see, for instance, the Rwandans derive lots of nutrition from them. Um, Lots of them are grown in Asia, in India, and China. India only exports 1% of their bananas, so lots of them are exchanged locally. And then bananas are also regarded by scientists as the world's first fruit, originating in the Papua New Guinea era around 10,000 years ago or so. So there's lots of different varieties of bananas. I kind of think of like the apple orchard and all the different ones we looked at. You can see on the bottom right, there's so many different ways like bananas can look. But all of them come from the genus Musa. And so on the top left, you have a wild type banana or a non-domesticated banana, and you can notice it has seeds. More on that in a sec. On the top right, you have the matoke banana, which you can mash up, kind of like mashed potatoes, and the dish is also called matoke. And then the bottom left, you have grilled plantains, which is another way you can prepare types of bananas. And then the one we eat, the Cavendish, is technically a dessert variety. So each of these is kind of like an example of a larger subset. There's many different varieties, like over 1,000 different varieties of bananas, but these are just some examples. And so bananas are very homogeneous. And so as we talked about earlier in the semester, it has to do with the diploids and triploids. And so at the last slide, the banana with the seeds, those they call wild type bananas, and those are diploids. And if you remember, triploids and other odd ploidy organisms have a harder time reproducing. And so triploids, or the triploid banana, has no seeds. Another example of that is the seedless watermelon. And so since there's no seeds, it becomes very difficult to breed bananas and get the traits that you're looking for. And so you have to go back to the wild type bananas and kind of breed those instead into the varieties of bananas without seeds, the triploid bananas. And so you might wonder, if there's no seeds in our bananas, how do we like grow them? And so it's pretty interesting. So they're all clonally reproduced. Um, so I didn't know this. When I heard that first, I thought like it was some scientific like take the cells and like clone them. But actually, you can see on the right here, these are called suckers. And so you take one of those suckers out, and then you can plant that, and it'll grow the exact same clone of that original plant. And both plants would produce the triploid banana. So as I mentioned before, Cavendish is the main variety of bananas we eat. It's a dessert type of banana. It accounts for pretty much all of the importing and exporting around the world of bananas, but locally grown, that's where more of the varieties come in. But still, the Cavendish accounts for over half of total banana production in the world. But before the Cavendish was this large main spread dominant banana, we had the Gros Michel, which translates to Big Mike roughly. And so it's also known as the Big Mike banana. These were bigger and far more flavorful than the Cavendish. But as you can probably guess, since bananas are so homogeneous, if one gets sick with the disease, then all the rest will probably get sick with the disease since they're grown in close vicinity. And so the Fusarium wilt race 1, which was a fungal disease, came in and wiped off Gros Michel almost to extinction in the 1950s. But they found the Cavendish was found to be more resistant. So they took the Cavendish and replaced it with, they took the Gros Michel and replaced it with the Cavendish. And now the Cavendish is the most widespread banana. However, now there is Fusarium wilt tropical race 4, and now the Cavendish banana is actually susceptible to this. And so the speaker on the podcast cited that this is the biggest challenge for global banana production right now is overcoming that the most prominent banana is susceptible to this disease. So in this slide we have examples of obstacles that bananas face. And since they're so homogeneous, like we said, they're very vulnerable to diseases. The most common diseases are bacterial diseases, fungal diseases, and viral diseases. I'm going to have one of each of those. So on the top left, we have banana xanthomonas wilt. You can also abbreviate that as BXW. And right now it's common in East Africa, where it wipes out several fields of banana crops. And it spreads very fast. Then to the right of that, we have an example of Fusarium wilt. That was the one that wiped out the Gros Michel and is now has advanced to where the Cavendish is also vulnerable to it. On the bottom left, we have an example of a viral disease called banana bunchy top virus. And so you can kind of see it as like a bunchy top, but it also stunts the growth, so it can't ever produce fruit. Then to the right of that, these are pests that are common for banana crops. So we have nematodes on the bottom right, and then on the far right we have weevils. And you can spray pesticides for these, but it's difficult as banana trees can get very tall, and so you need the proper equipment to be able to spray that high, which isn't available everywhere. So yeah. Also, one more thing to note here is that often these diseases and pests exist together. So when trying to make one or two banana varieties, you really want to have multiple resistances or lots stacked on top of each other, which makes it even more difficult to find an optimal variety that is resistant to all these different types of things. So on this slide, we have some proposed solutions in the podcast, which we've kind of touched on already. So conserving wild relatives in order to have more resources to breed possible commercial bananas. To diversify cultivated varieties so that they're not all susceptible to the same thing. Breeding for pest and disease resistance or the use of pesticides could also help. And then promoting a food market will help with diversifying cultivated varieties, as then companies can see it as more profitable to grow these different types of bananas. Also, something they didn't touch on, but I was kind of interested in maybe promoting people to try wild type bananas, so the ones with a seed. I'm not sure really how at all you would cook that, but I don't know. That could also be something that might work, I would think. And then also on the right here, these would be some other ways that you could diversify cultivated varieties, either through the use of GMOs or gene editing. So GMOs is where you bring in some outside DNA into the banana, and you would usually want that to be resistant to some type of thing that you can't really find a resistance in bananas. So you're introducing this outer thing to give the banana a resistance. And then also the CRISPR gene editing, which can kind of make more or less more natural alterations to the banana. Yeah, and so something else she discussed is that public opinion of GMOs and gene edited food has gone up, which has been very helpful for them to be able to make more people want to like buy and be able to eat these. And so she considers Europe to be very impactful with that, as they're kind of like the leaders in that. And then also Japan recently approved like genetically modified tomato, which helps other countries feel more comfortable with the idea of GMOs. So overall, I really enjoyed this podcast. I thought it was very well done. Um, Dr. Lena Tripathi seemed very knowledgeable about these types of things. I get like the impression she's like one of the experts in the field. Everything she was saying just was so like dense with information, but still um, accessible to understand. Um, and yeah, everything she talked about seemed to line up with what we've learned so far in the course. Um, yeah. So the first article I read was called "Inside the Multi-Billion-Dollar Banana Industry and Why It's Under Threat." And this had lots of the same information as the podcast, as well as the other two readings. Um, but each of them touched on a few different things. So this one had lots of like statistics about the economic impact of bananas, how much they're used worldwide, how dominant the Cavendish is, and then talking about the TR4 strain. And it kind of discussed this idea of, since bananas are becoming so, or because diseases are adapting to be able to take over bananas, bananas are getting harder to grow. And so in the long term, this will probably make banana prices rise, along with global warming, which will also make it harder to grow bananas since they're mostly grown in tropical places, which will be impacted. Yeah. So the second article I read was titled "Stalking the Wild Banana." This was a New York Times article that followed Gabriel Sachter-Smith around on his journey identifying different varieties of bananas. And this article had lots of different pictures of various bananas, like the two listed here, and just kind of showed how exciting these different varieties can be. It went into a little bit of the Gros-Michels history, which we went over, and some genetic engineering solutions, which we went over. And then it also mentioned the International MUSA Germplasm Transit Center, which is located in Belgium, which is one of the largest collections of banana genetics. And it safeguards over 1,600 different banana varieties. So yeah. And then the last article I read was titled "There Are More Than 1,000 Varieties of Banana, and We Eat One of Them. Here's Why That's Absurd." This was through The Guardian, and it talked about the importance of food diversity in society, which we've talked about a lot in this class. Diverse foods tend to be more nutritious and better for us. They tend to preserve different cultures and lots of different tastes for cooks. Diverse food systems are more resistant to climate change, to diseases and pests. This article also talked about looking at consumer behavior. So how we need to get people on board with eating these different foods in order to support a diverse food system. And then it talks about some different biodiversity initiatives, such as some different like government policies in place for preserving biodiversity. And then it pivoted to talk about a particular wheat variety. And it went over some of the different uses, like certain flours it makes, and how it's starting to enter society, but still not quite there yet. So here are my references, and just as a summary, lots of these had similar topics to what we talk about in class, like how there's such a wide variety of bananas with so many different colors and shapes, and whether they have seeds or not. And then we talked about how bananas are difficult to breed since they're triploids and don't have seeds. And so they're grown clonally, which makes them very homogeneous and vulnerable to viruses, which was what happened with the Gros Michel banana. And so in order to prevent this for the Cavendish, which is now vulnerable to viruses, we can use genetic techniques, but also just as well, just promoting biodiversity in any way that we can. So yeah, thank you.